Ethan's room was on the lower level of his family's split-level home in Boulder, Colorado. It was the biggest bedroom in the house, a little sanctuary just off the garage and down the stairs from the main living area. Most kids would have killed for that kind of space and privacy. No sisters barging in, no parents hovering, just him, his video games, and his own full-size bed, a recent upgrade after his twin was handed down to his younger sibling. That summer was brutal. Temperatures hovered in the mid-90s. The whole house felt like it was melting, especially down in Ethan's room where the AC had a hard time reaching. So he kept a fan on, blasting full speed beside his bed. It made a constant white noise that helped him fall asleep. But around mid-July, things started to change. At first, it was little things. He'd wake up in the middle of the night for no reason. Just snap, wide awake at 3:04 a.m., heart racing, mouth dry. Sometimes he'd get up and go to the bathroom. Sometimes he'd just lie there and stare at the ceiling until morning. He didn't think much of it. Maybe he was growing. Maybe it was the heat. But then, one night, he walked past the kitchen and noticed something strange. The refrigerator light was on. And not just the light. The door was wide open, casting a white glow across the tile floor. He heard rustling, like someone going through containers. But the kitchen was empty. No one was supposed to be up. His parents were asleep. His sisters were in their rooms. There was no sound except the soft hum of the fridge and a faint creak of floorboards heading back down the stairs toward his room. He didn't say anything to anyone. Maybe he imagined it. Maybe one of his sisters got up for a snack. He told himself that. Until the next day when his mom walked into his room while folding laundry and said, "Ethan, something smells awful in here. Did something die?" He sniffed the air. Nothing. "I don't smell anything," he said. But that night, when he came back from brushing his teeth, he did smell something. Something sour, moldy, like garbage left in the sun. Still, he chalked it up to dirty laundry and opened a window. Then came the night everything changed. The AC was finally on, so Ethan didn't use his fan. The silence was almost disorienting. He turned off his console, climbed into bed, and rolled to his side, trying to fall asleep to the hum of cold air from the ceiling vent. He didn't make it past midnight. He woke up to a sound he couldn't place. At first, he thought it was the vent stopping. Then he realized it was breathing. Slow, raspy, close. He held his own breath. It kept going. It wasn't his. His eyes darted around the room. Closet door? Closed. Desk? Empty. Shadows danced across the wall from the nightlight in the hallway, but nothing moved. And then his gaze dropped to the floor. For reasons he couldn't explain, his body moved before his thoughts caught up. He got out of bed, crouched, and lifted the edge of his blanket where it draped onto the carpet. That's when he saw it. A man, a full-grown man, dirty, bearded, lying sideways under the bed like he belonged there. His arms tucked in, his breathing deep and even, like he'd been asleep there for hours, maybe days. Ethan didn't scream right away. He stared, froze, and when it finally clicked, when the image burned through the fog of disbelief, he let out a scream so sharp it shattered the stillness of the night. His parents' door flew open upstairs. Footsteps pounded the stairs. Ethan was crying, shaking, pointing to the bed, unable to form words. His dad didn't wait. He stormed in, yanked up the mattress, and revealed the man in full. The intruder sat up dazed, as if unsure where he was, mumbling something incomprehensible. His clothes were stained, his fingernails blackened. There were empty water bottles and snack wrappers under the bed, things that didn't belong to Ethan. The police came, took him away, said he was homeless, possibly mentally ill. No one knew how he got in. The back door was always locked, or so they thought. Ethan wouldn't sleep in that room again, not for months. His parents installed cameras, replaced the locks, and threw out all the open food in the fridge. But none of that changed the fact that someone had been living inches from Ethan's face, watching him sleep, breathing beneath him every single night. Sometimes the most terrifying monsters don't come from movies. They come from the spaces we trust the most. They come from under the bed. If that story rattled you even a little, hit that subscribe button to help us keep bringing you real-life horror that lingers in your thoughts long after the video ends. Your support means the world and gives us the fuel to keep digging up the darkest, most haunting true stories out there. Now, here's a quick question for you. Drop your answer in the comments. Would you rather A. Sleep in a completely dark room with no fan or background noise? B. Sleep with the lights on, but knowing someone might be watching you from the shadows? Comment A or B below, and tell us why. We're watching. The war had taught Nikolai many things: how to fight, how to survive, and most of all, how to live with fear. But what happened in the forest outside Smolensk wasn't something he could ever learn to live with. Even at 101 years old, seated in his rocking chair in a quiet Massachusetts nursing home, his eyes still glaze over when he speaks of that night. His voice lowers, shoulders tense, and there's always a pause before he begins. That night, he often says, wasn't about the Germans. It wasn't about war. It was about something much older and far more dangerous. It was February 1943. The snow had fallen hard over the past week, turning the woods outside Smolensk into a white, motionless graveyard. After nearly 2 months of brutal fighting, Nikolai's unit, what remained of it, had finally reclaimed a shattered village on the edge of the forest. There were no major celebrations, just relief, silence, exhaustion. But that night, for the first time in weeks, the men allowed themselves a moment to breathe. Inside a partially intact building, once a schoolhouse, they gathered around a working stove. Bottles passed hand to hand. Cigarettes glowed like fireflies. Someone sang. Someone laughed. And for a short while, it felt like the world wasn't burning. Nikolai sat with his closest comrade, Victor. The two had trained together, fought together, buried friends side by side. They didn't talk much that night, just shared a look, a silent understanding that surviving one more day was a victory in itself. It was sometime past midnight when it started, a scream. Far away, cutting through the stillness like a blade through cloth, high-pitched, human, and full of terror. The room fell silent. Bottles paused midair. The singing stopped. Then another scream. Without a word, Victor and Nikolai stood. They weren't the only ones. Within minutes, 8 men geared up, rifles slung, boots crunching in the snow as they followed the sound into the trees. The forest near Smolensk was dense and old. The kind of place that seemed to breathe on its own. Branches arched overhead like ribs. The moon was high, but the trees swallowed most of the light. Only the crunch of snow and their own breath filled the space. As they moved deeper, the screaming stopped. A thick silence took its place. Nikolai felt it first, a shift in the air. Not just cold, but wrong. As if the woods were watching. The men stopped, exchanged looks. They agreed to split up into pairs. Nikolai stayed with Victor, heading north while the others fanned out in other directions. Every step deeper into the forest felt heavier. Then they heard it, a soft, low sobbing. They followed the sound, step by step, breath clouding in front of them. The trees felt tighter now, almost as if they were closing in. And then they saw the blood. It dotted the snow in small, scattered patches. Then more. A trail. Victor held up a hand and crouched, pointing forward. 2 bodies. At first, they assumed both were dead. 2 German soldiers, one sprawled on his back, the other slumped against a tree. As they approached, they realized one was still alive. But just barely. Nikolai couldn't look away from the dead one. His uniform was torn to shreds, his limbs gone. Torn, not cut. His face unrecognizable. Skin peeled away like layers of paper. And the smell, burnt, chemical, not like any corpse Nikolai had smelled before. Victor approached the surviving soldier, who flinched violently at the sound of footsteps. His eyes darted around like a trapped animal's. Blood soaked his chest, his leg was a twisted mess, and he clutched a scrap of fabric like a child with a toy. He spoke in German, fast and panicked. Nikolai caught only a few words. Beast, eyes, not human. Victor tried to calm him, but the man only grew more hysterical, screaming something like, "Das Koloss!" Then Victor did something Nikolai never questioned, but never forgot. He raised his pistol and ended the man's suffering. The silence returned, but only for a moment. Something groaned in the darkness, long, guttural, low. Not a scream, not a bear, not any sound they'd ever heard before. Nikolai spun toward the trees. A shadow shifted in the corner of his vision. Victor saw it too. Something tall, too tall. It moved like it was gliding, not running. A blur between the trunks. Both men fired. Bullets echoed. Then silence. The others came running, hearing the gunfire. But by the time they arrived, there was nothing left. Just the two Soviet soldiers standing in the snow, hearts pounding, rifles smoking. The bodies were taken back to camp. A report was filed. The German soldiers' bizarre injuries were chalked up to some wild animal, though no one could name one that left chemical burns and stripped bones so clean. Nikolai tried to sleep that night, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw it again, that movement in the trees. The shape, the presence. Weeks later, Victor handed him a folded piece of paper. Inside was a crude sketch, an outline of a towering, thin figure with long arms and blank white eyes. It wasn't just a man, Victor said, and it wasn't part of the war. That sketch remained folded inside Nikolai's coat until the day he left the Red Army. Years later, when he fled the Soviet Union and started a new life in the United States, he brought it with him, tucked inside an envelope with a single word scribbled on the back, Koloss. In all the stories he shared with his grandchildren, Nikolai rarely cried. But when he told this one, his voice would always break at the end, because war had shown him what humans could do to each other. But Smolensk, that forest, that night, it showed him what the world could do to humans. And not everything in the world was meant to be seen.
When Emma and Jake moved into their new home in Asheville, North Carolina, it felt like a dream. Nestled at the edge of a quiet neighborhood lined with maple trees and soft hills, their modest two-bedroom house was everything they'd hoped for. It was the kind of place people described as perfect for starting a family. Safe, peaceful, and surrounded by nature. The neighbors were polite, if a little distant, and the couple quickly fell into the comforting routine of unpacking boxes after work and talking about paint colors and backyard gardens. On the second weekend, after a long day of furniture shopping and reorganizing the kitchen, Emma stood by the stove, stirring a pot of pasta, while Jake browsed rug options on his laptop. The windows were cracked open to let in the evening breeze. The smell of garlic and tomato sauce lingered in the air. They were tired, but content. That's when Jake decided to open the sliding glass door in the back, hoping to let in a little more fresh air. As he stepped toward the door, he slowed. His breath caught. Then he froze. There was someone sitting in their backyard. A man, slouched forward in one of their patio chairs, arms resting on his knees, head down, completely still. Jake didn't speak right away. He just stood there, eyes locked on the glass. When he finally turned to Emma, his voice was calm but strained. "Emma, don't panic, but there's someone outside." Emma, puzzled, walked over. The moment she saw him, she gasped and instinctively clutched Jake's arm. They both watched the man through the glass. The way he sat, motionless like he had been there for hours, made it even more unsettling.
"Should we say something?" Jake whispered. "Should I go out there?" Emma shook her head. "Call the police." But Jake, unsure whether they were overreacting, knocked on the glass instead. The man lifted his head and smiled. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't even sane. It was crooked, half laughing, like he was amused by something only he understood. He looked to be in his 50s, with a long gray beard and tattooed forearms, the designs fading and warped with age. He stood up slowly and walked toward the door. Emma backed away as he came closer. Jake stood his ground, heart pounding. Then, without warning, the man leaned in, his breath fogging the glass, and looked directly at Emma. He started licking his lips, mouthing vulgar, disgusting things neither of them could unhear. Jake yanked the blinds shut and grabbed his phone. The man didn't leave. He stayed at the glass, now speaking loudly, yelling obscenities, his voice distorted and cruel. Emma trembled in the kitchen, while Jake spoke to the 911 dispatcher, begging them to hurry. But by the time the officers arrived, the backyard was empty. They took a report, walked around with flashlights, told them to keep doors locked and call again if he returned. That night, Emma didn't sleep, and the next day, they went out and bought motion-activated lights and a new security camera. But nothing prepared them for the second visit. It was around 11 p.m. Emma was on the couch, scrolling through her phone while Jake worked upstairs. The lights in the backyard were off, the curtains mostly drawn. But from the corner of her eye, she noticed movement. She peeked through the blind. He was back, standing near the same chair, this time smoking a cigarette, muttering to himself. She held her breath, praying he wouldn't notice her watching. But he did. He turned toward the window, stepped forward, and with sudden fury, slammed his hands against the glass. Emma screamed. Jake came running, phone in hand. The man was shouting again, louder, more aggressive, his face pressed against the window pane as he hurled the most vile threats they'd ever heard. Emma ran upstairs, tears streaming down her face. Jake stayed, shouting back that the police were on their way. And then, just like before, the man vanished into the darkness before the flashing red and blue lights showed up. They couldn't take it anymore. They canvassed the neighborhood the next day, knocking on doors, asking if anyone knew who the man was. An older couple down the block looked at the photo from their security camera and nodded slowly. His name was Rob, a known threat in the area. He'd beaten his ex-wife, had a long history of violence, drinking, and unhinged behavior. He lived just around the corner in a rundown property partially hidden by overgrown trees. Emma and Jake filed another report, but without a clear act of trespassing or harm caught on camera, there was nothing they could legally do. The officers sympathized, told them to keep documenting everything, keep the cameras rolling. For weeks, Emma couldn't sit in the living room after dark. Jake kept a baseball bat near the door. The fear had changed them. They weren't just scared of one man anymore. They were scared of how fragile safety really was. Then Emma started recording audio diaries. At first, they were just personal, a way to process the fear, the helplessness. But then she started posting short clips online, her voice raw, honest, trembling at times. Unexpectedly, the videos resonated. Other women commented with their own stories. Husbands, parents, neighbors, people who had also felt that chilling fear in their own homes. Emma's voice became a kind of lifeline, not a cry for help, but a warning, a call for awareness. Eventually, one of her posts got traction. It was shared widely, picked up by a local news blog. The man's image, clear from their security footage, was recognized by multiple people. That was the last time anyone saw Rob. No one knew if he moved, got arrested, or something worse. He disappeared just as suddenly as he arrived. But some nights, when the air is still and the lights flicker outside the window, Emma still pauses, still listens, still waits. Because the scariest thing isn't always the man at the door. Sometimes it's the silence after he's gone. Across 3 chilling yet deeply human stories, we met Ethan, a young boy whose safe space was invaded by a stranger hiding beneath his bed. Nikolai, a battle-hardened soldier who witnessed something in the frozen woods of Smolensk that defied logic and time. And Emma and Jake, a couple whose quiet life was shattered by a man lurking outside their glass door. Each of them came face to face with fear in its rawest form, not the kind you see in movies, but the kind that creeps into your everyday life, catching you when your guard is down, in the places you feel safest. These weren't just stories of horror. They were stories of survival, resilience, and awakening. The most powerful lesson these stories offer is this: true fear often hides in plain sight, and being prepared, mentally, emotionally, and practically, is not paranoia, it's protection. Whether it's double-checking locks, trusting your instincts, speaking up when something feels wrong, or supporting those who've experienced trauma, these small actions can be life-changing. In a world where real horror doesn't knock, it waits in the shadows, we must learn to shine our light deliberately. Now, here's a quick question for you. Think carefully. If you heard a strange sound in the middle of the night, would you A, stay in bed and try to ignore it? B, get up and investigate right away? Comment A or B down below. We want to see how you would react. Also, what's your take on these true stories? Which one hit you the hardest and why? Drop your thoughts in the comments so others can read and connect. Your perspective might help someone feel less alone in their own fear. And if these stories gave you chills, insights, or just a reason to double-check your locks tonight, make sure to subscribe. It's the best way to support the channel and help us keep sharing powerful, real stories that stay with you long after the screen goes dark.